I just want to mention, talk about rape. What is rape? Is it natural? Is it bad? Is it good? Is that subjective? Is it objective? Does it really matter? Rape is absolutely natural. It is existing in almost every species that exists on this planet Earth, regardless of whether you think it's good or bad. Every species relies entirely on the concept of rape for reproduction. Humans is the only species with an ideology of rape or a objection to rape. Rape is extremely natural. It happens in every species I am aware of. Unless we can determine and understand a language of a species that confers, let me have sex with you, yes, you can have sex with me, and then consensual sex on that matter, we cannot determine that rape is anything but an absolute natural aspect. Of course, this leads me to the argument and the concept of what is considered a logical fallacy, the naturalistic fallacy. Essentially saying that just because something is natural does not mean it is good or accepted in a society. Well, I agree. Just because something is natural does not mean it is accepted as good or in a society. That, of course, is true. But what is also true is that morality is completely subjective. No one can possibly argue rationally that morality is objective. They are immediately proven wrong just by differences in opinion from one person to the next. They are immediately proven wrong, which destroys their argument immediately, but somehow they fail to see that. No rational mind will ever conclude that objective reality exists. It isn't possible for a rational mind to conclude that. When it comes to morality, people generally think what is right or wrong based on their specific situations and the specific things that make them upset or angry, which are themselves subject to change based on experiences and situations. The fact that people differ in opinion at all and what is considered moral, right or wrong, it shows that it is a fact. All I have to do is show what a fact is by definition. A fact is something that is observable and repeatable and therefore accepted as truth. It is observable and repeatable that people have different opinions on what is right and wrong. Therefore, it is accepted as truth that morality is absolutely not objective, but subjective based on personal opinion. The simple fact that I can disagree with you on what is right or wrong proves that, by definition and by an absolute fact, anyone arguing that is not worth your time at this point because they are completely wrong, completely misunderstanding definitions, and they are completely trying to convince you that you have to believe a certain way when that is not true. For example, certain people, unfortunately atheists in a lot of cases, because Christians tend to say their morality comes from God, and other theists, for example, will say their morality comes from their creator or their God. What happens in the form of atheists in a lot of sense, who are statists and who believe in the ideology of controlling other people and that humans are flawed, therefore only some flawed humans have extra non-flawedness to control other people. That mental discrepancy in them tends to lead them to the ideology that morality is objective and that anybody who disagrees with them is wrong. They'll basically make a statement that, based on the truths we learn over time, while realizing that science is tentative, meaning that at no point you can say there's objectively truth. It will always change over time based on the current opinion of scientists at that time. I mean, as we can clearly show, smoking was considered good. It was promoted by doctors, and it was actually advertised through doctors in the early 1900s for a lot of important reasons. And it's called profit, making money when you can. If you can be an advertisement for a company to make money, you will be. That proceeds over what is right or wrong to you, because making money becomes your sole important reason to survive in this civilized and destructive world we're in, period. as humans, trying to live separately from everything else, we try to have a makeshift system that relies on paper money and that relies on destruction of the natural environment to create a system for us that is more comfortable, that is less demanding on our personal work and on our personal life in general. We don't care about food. The most important things for us are obviously, by definition, food, shelter, water, and space. The four things we rely on more than anything. Most people know that as food, water, and shelter, space is added as the aspect of we need fucking space. We need that space of natural land and natural things growing and surviving for us to live off. Every living thing lives off other living things, regardless of what living thing you are. Every single living thing in the biological community of living things relies on other living things to survive. If you could point out one thing to me that lives without living off another thing, I would be quite surprised and proven wrong. That would be happy. I would be happy to be proven wrong. I strive to be correct from my understanding and my opinion based off the current situation. This gets more into what we're talking about when it comes to rape. Since it is completely objective whether something is right or wrong, and that objectiveness comes from your current situation and your current understanding of said situation, you can guarantee that people are going to see things differently. When I talk about the natural community, for example, rape, when you look at almost any living species that needs, that is sexual, that needs intercourse in some sense with another, when it comes to penetration or spreading your seed to another variation of your species to create a living thing, when basically not asexual, if you don't have to fucking, which most mammals, for example, we can talk about mammals in most case and cover that. Technically, we humans are mammals. I can show you, if you could point out one single species at all that doesn't, in some way, if you could point out any sexual species that doesn't in some way rape another species, I would be quite surprised, and I would be happy to see that, because the truth is much more primary than my own personal perspective. But it's also important to say that the truth itself is slightly based on my perspective. When it comes to morality, what is right or wrong can only come from myself or my influence from other people. It is not based on objective truth in any way. This kind of brings me talking about Matt Dillahunty, where he has said at multiple points that truth is objective and that morality is objective. Therefore, based on his understanding of the truth at the time, he can determine morality at the time. Sure, if you think something is right or wrong based on the truth you understand, then you can determine morality based on that truth, just like anybody can, but it's subjective. Your idea of what is right, what is truth based on that right or wrong is always subjective, especially when you can clearly yourself admit that science is tentative. It is never, you should never, ever, ever say science says this, so therefore this. You are lying to yourself and lying to every person who is a scientist, every person who pursues science, which is nothing but the pursuit of knowledge. Anybody who pursues knowledge in any way should clearly be insulted by the fact that someone is saying that this knowledge is fact at the time, it will never change. I mean, that's the concept. That's what you're saying when there's an absolute truth that won't change, and that you can derive right or wrong from that absolute truth that won't change. That's actually against the ideology of science in general, where things are not ever considered absolute. It is always tentative. A fact is simply something that is observed and repeatable and therefore considered truth. It can always be determined that it is not truth. People can always change their mind and say, this is not observable, this is not repeatable, and therefore we no longer consider it truth. It's as simple as that. If you can repeat it or observe it over a period of time, we consider it truth. Does it mean it actually is real? No. Does it mean it actually is right? No. Does it mean it is wrong? No. Especially the right-wrong aspect are completely opinionated, subjective. The truth aspect, I believe, can be objective to an extent. Obviously, our understanding of that is a whole other story, because we were always in a tentative point of learning new things and determining that we should always be willing to determine that we don't know everything. A real scientist would, of course, say that. A real scientist will never say something is guaranteed to be truth. The word fact should be recognized by everybody, even though it's misused, and the reason why it is not recognized as what it is by everybody is the reason because it is misused. But what a fact is just something that is accepted as true over the period of time based on the available evidence. It does not mean it is absolutely true. It does not mean that everybody agrees that it is true. It does not mean that I myself would agree that it is true. Someone who says something is a fact is just accepted as truth. Okay? It is important to recognize that we all use these terms for reasons to exemplify and for reasons to give our wording and our saying kind of extra strength. But it's at the same time important to realize that is all that it is. Something that is fact is not guaranteed to be fact tomorrow, and it absolutely is not necessarily and will not be fact tomorrow, because we are learning things new every single day. Things that scientists have said were fact yesterday, they have absolutely and will always change to be not fact tomorrow as things are determined and changed. It's also important to recognize science, by definition, is a pursuit of knowledge. Anybody that pursues knowledge is, by definition, a scientist, and in the process of pursuing knowledge, it's in the process of science, okay? Whether you agree with their position or not does not change the fact that it is science. Whether you receive a degree at a university, what you call a university, a private corporation or public corporation that is funded by private property, by private systems, whether they consider you professional or not does not mean anything different to rational-minded people who understand that information is information regardless of where it comes from and regardless of where you say it comes from. To any logical mind, the fact that you came from a university does not mean anything at all. In fact, most of us realize that universities perpetuate ideologies because that is the purpose of an institution of any way, is to perpetuate a certain ideology, to teach you a certain ideology so you can pursue that ideology as a career and teach it to other people. Does not mean it's correct, does not mean anything like that at all. Because you went to university does not mean you have any more knowledge than someone who studied the same concept on the internet in their own time, in library books on their own time, with other people on their own time. You can assume that you had more time studying the matter, that you had more time focusing on statistics or probability or test or any kind of the scientific method, for example. You can assume that gives you a better knowledge. You can assume that gives you a better place in society. You can assume that gives you a better place in understanding. But none of that actually equals truth. It is quite honestly easy for most people to actually learn more about science through their own pursuit and interest in the study, such as the internet and books, than it is for someone to go to a university, learn a specific rule of what science is, learn a specific rule of what is acceptable and what is not, and you're basically following someone else's term of what knowledge is, rather than determining that for yourself based on what is the available evidence. In my opinion, if you call yourself a scientist because you have a degree, that absolutely means nothing to what you say. It doesn't make your weight of what you say more important. It doesn't make weight of what you say to be true. It doesn't make anything you say. It doesn't give you more weight over any other person, whether they are a scientist by degree or not. Absolutely not. That alone is an appeal to authority, which it is a logical fallacy that is completely valid. Because the simple fact that an authority, what you consider authority, does not necessarily have any more information, and in most cases, obviously and honestly, they are a repeater of information that they have learned, in a lot of cases have not critically thought about. So unfortunately, in a lot of cases, someone who does independent studies such on science and learns by themselves through independent research is going to be less biased and more open to what they actually find in their results in their readings than someone who went to university and basically promotes the repeating of information they learned, regardless of what is true or what is actually tangible and intelligent within their conversation. You become a repeater of information just because you learned it from your campus or from your specific school you went to. that means nothing to anybody with a logical mind of critical thinking. They will determine whether or not what you're saying matters based on the actual context of what you say, regardless of where you came from. For example, peer review. Don't tell me something's peer review unless you're able to explain what is specifically in that peer review, because you should not ever mention peer review until you fully understand what is in the context of that peer review, and therefore you agree. And if you could explain that much on its own, you never have to mention peer review. You only have to mention what is in the context and why you believe it, and then we can have a conversation based on that. When you mention peer review, you are automatically appealing to authority and therefore trying to convince me based on your illogical appeal to authority. That alone is baseless, pointless, and is delusional in the aspect of gaining knowledge based on actual information. If you want someone to gain knowledge based on information, you give them the information, or you make the information available. If you expect someone to automatically believe you when you make the claim, just because it is something you call peer review does not mean anything to anybody else with a rational mind. It just does not work that way. Anybody with a rational mind, it just does not work that way. What you're trying to do is get someone to automatically accept your version of events based on the fact that a person in white coat, or therefore scientist, has agreed with you just because you say so. That's irrelevant to information, that's irrelevant to knowledge, it's irrelevant to learning better things. If you just automatically agree with all science that some authority gives you, you will be in huge conflict, because scientists and science in general consist of disagreements and acceptance of things that aren't necessarily objective in any way. And in most cases, science is not objective. It cannot be objective. That's literally the purpose of science, is an individual understanding and maybe a spreading of that individual understanding to other people, but it is never objective. It is always subjective. Science is subjective. The knowledge itself, the truth, may be objective. That is, we don't know at this point. We can't really say science is objective. We can't say truth is objective when we don't even know, when we can guarantee that we say our pursuit of truth is subjective. I'm inclined to think that probably things that are truth are definitely objective, that regardless of who looks at them should find them as truth, but we certainly can't say that objectively. We're lying to ourselves. It is a subjective understanding based on what we currently know. Any miscommunication or misunderstanding of that is purposely done or ignorantly done. In Matt Dillahunty's case, I would say it's purposely done because he is fighting against theists in general, which I am not. I'm an atheist in any way necessary. But at the same time, I would say that Matt Dillahunty may be atheist, but he is certainly religious in almost every aspect I can think of. He actually belongs to a religion that is far worse and far more destructive and far more forceful on other people's lives than Christianity, or Muslim, or Islam, or Judaism, or anything like that. In fact, he is the statist, which is the most destructive and the most permanent religion to get rid of. It's ironic that he will stand as an atheist against religion while failing to see that he is completely religious as a statist. Though at the same time, seeing that he spent so much time in a religion, apparently like 20, 30 years, until he realized it was silly, shows how bad he is at actual critical thinking. It's something else, obviously, that I don't believe he spent 30 years without critical thinking and then learned critical thinking to dismiss the religion he believed in. It's more likely that he basically developed a bias against his religion through the same lack of critical thinking that he's had for over the years, the same reason why he continues to be a statist. It wouldn't be likely that he used critical thinking to get rid of religion of theism, but not the religion of statism. While that requires the same critical thinking, it is unlikely and almost impossible that he used critical thinking to remove himself from religion. It is more likely he used some general disagreement or argument or fight with the religion to separate himself, where it turned into I'm an atheist, let me fight against religion. I have nothing against atheists fighting against religion. I have a problem with religion, but it becomes all religions, especially statism. Statism is one of the worst. It will always be the worst. And any atheist who argues for statism, I don't know what to say. And in the first aspect, you're clearly delusional in the differences between your religion and others' religion. which has basically the same consequences, the same forces, same actions. There's not much difference. You, as a religious statist, believe that there's an omniscient power called the state that has right to rule over other people, where other people are flawed and cannot rule over themselves. And so, in a weird way, you're appealing to other theists while being an atheist and believing in the state. It's a very contradictory state. I don't see how you could possibly be against religion, and you can't be against religion in a state just because you are religious. But you certainly can be against theist, and be religious as a statist, because theism itself is a religion, but it's a theism that has to do with the belief in God, specifically a creator of the world. While many statists don't believe the government created the world, they believe that the government is required to contain, maintain, and make the world a peaceful place. That is it's a religion as anybody can understand it and they can define it. And it's quite sad to see people as delusional as Matt Dillahunty take an appeal to these religions while trying to shun other religions, when he is absolutely no better, and in fact, a lot of cases worse. His beliefs in statism are no more represented by truth or fact or any rational belief than a theistic ideology of what God is and why they should follow God. He basically, for example, I shouldn't say he necessarily, but all statists in general, we plan the same false ideologies to believe that the state is required, just as they believe that God exists. They are quite equally religions in any way I can explain, and they are quite equally dangerous in any way I can fathom. Beyond that, statism is a way for people to feel, to express their control and want to control other people, while pretending to be different than religious people. It's a very strong use for that. It's easy to pretend, I'm not as crazy as these guys, I don't support slavery, but actually, I support slavery through statism. And then they'll say, well, statism isn't slavery, you signed a social contract. Well, actually, being the fact that you're in America with 80% Christians, wouldn't that mean you signed the social contract to be Christian, and therefore not being Christian is a violation of your social contract and you should be killed or imprisoned or sent to another state? Or if you don't like Christianity, why don't you get out and move? If you don't like it, you can get out, right? Statist? Atheist statist? No, you're pretty delusional, aren't you? And that's unfortunate. People with rational minds have to deal with irrational minds like you that pretend to be rational. That's fucking frustrating. At least a lot of theists don't pretend to be rational like that. Some do. It can be just as frustrating, but most theists I know in general are statists too. So that's kind of implied and expected, especially when the Bible says that you must follow all authority, because authority is specifically ordered by God and cannot exist unless implemented by God. That's in Romans. I forget the exact verse, but I'm sure if anybody with a Bible can look at Romans, read the shit, and find out exactly what I'm talking about. You are ordered to follow your authority. You are ordered to be basically a mindless capitulator to an oppressive system, regardless of what that system is. So I shouldn't say an oppressive, but if that system is oppressive, you are enforced by your God to follow that, or be against your God and go to hell, of course, spend your life in eternity. When it comes to the state, you have to follow our state rules, or we will fucking throw you in a cage, and we will implement our force and our violence on you. In some cases, at least a lot of Christians don't implement their violence directly. They say, hey, we'll threaten you with afterlife. And of course, most of atheists don't believe in afterlife, so the threat is kind of nil. It almost means nothing. It's like, fuck you for saying that shit, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It's not a threat to our lives, because we don't believe in the afterlife. We believe we're dead when we're dead. So, but your statist ideology that says, I will actually harm you while you're alive, I will actually violate your rights while you're alive, I will hurt you as much as I can to make myself satisfied, I will hurt you to make other people satisfied, I will violate your rights because I hate freedom in general. That whole concept of statism is, in a lot of ways, way worse than religions of today. Of course, some religions are a little more vocal, they're more accurate to what their ideologies are, and they will hurt you for disagreeing and believing different. But it's a lot more prominent for people of the state religion to actually harm people because of their religious ideologies. I would say Matt is just as delusional, if not more, than every other Christian out there in the world. He is actually, I would say in a lot of cases, more, because he comes from Christianity, found atheism, saying, wait, these are unfounded beliefs, but sticks with the most unfounded beliefs ever, which is statism. That just shows he wants to hurt people, he wants to watch people hurt, and he enjoys seeing people hurt. If that isn't worse than every other religion that exists, if that isn't as bad, at least, as every other religion that exists, I don't know what it is. I mean, threatening me with hell in fucking my afterlife, which I don't believe in, isn't nearly as bad as Matt Dillahunty threatened me with my life for not agreeing with his social standards at the time. I mean, he's clearly much more of a tyrant, a slavery lover, or anything like that than most theists, period. The fact that he misses that makes any rational mind confused, because he clearly is not rational. But he will argue that he's a genius. Well, good. I'm sad to hear that so many geniuses are fucking irrational, like you, Matt. You think a genius would be better at being rational. But unfortunately, you are one of the most irrational, and it's actually driven mostly by your statism, because you are extremely religious. You do not think coherently or clearly based on what is actual available as evidence. You do not care about the truth. Like you say, I care about the truth. No, you care about supporting a statist ideology regardless of the truth. When a lot of people tell you have faith, you absolutely do have faith. When you talk about science, you almost never explain scientifically what is not. Okay, sometimes you say, I'm not a scientist, you shouldn't be asking me about that. That's what you should be doing all the time if you're not willing to actually give a scientific explanation, or at least determine your opinion based off science in any way. What you do most of the time is appeal to authority, saying, well, there's a peer review somewhere, and that's peer review, so that means it's fact. And then saying, well, science is tentative, meaning that nothing is actually true, but we can determine over time, that we think this is true based on the available evidence that has come, therefore meaning that it is not true, it is only accepted as truth, just what a fact is. That comes a problem right there. People think that saying this is a fact means that it is guaranteed. And when you hear me say this is a fact, you may be confused in the same way, thinking that I'm saying this is guaranteed. Absolutely not. A fact simply means that it's something that is accepted as truth based on the given evidence because of repeatability and testability. If it's observed and repeatable, it's usually accepted as a fact. That's why statism is not and will never be accepted as a fact of good. Good can never be accepted as a fact. Good is always subjective, because what is good for one is always bad for another. I give you the most basic analogy: a gazelle and a fucking lion. The lion catches the gazelle and eats it. Certainly that's good for the lion, being able to further survive, being able to eat the gazelle, being able to live longer, breed more, have babies. What's the most important purpose of life? Isn't that it? Every living thing lives off other living things, as we talked about earlier. Now the gazelle, trying to escape that lion, trying to live its life further, trying to basically breed more and create more life itself, that clearly isn't good for the gazelle to get eaten by a lion. Okay, so we say the gazelle escapes. Certainly that is good for the gazelle, because it doesn't die. It can further its evolution, its species, by reproducing more. It can continue to eat more grain and live longer. But the lion now doesn't have its food, and now is in a period of suffering trying to find food. So what clearly is good for one is always bad for another, and you can apply that to almost any situation. Saying there's an objective morality is not only dishonest, because I know you don't think that way honestly, but it is simply just stupid, because every bit of fact, observable and repeatable evidence, shows that it does not exist. It is nothing but a personal opinion at the point in period based on the available situation they are faced with. You can say, for example, murder's not wrong. Well, killing and murder is different. There's a weird ideology about that, of course. If you kill and we determine it's not justified, we call it murder. If you kill and we determine it is justified, we call it just killing. It's okay. That completely on its own shows the fact that it's subjective based on the situation. You can't honestly argue that. And I know Matt Dillahunty, at the very least, he fails completely in this, especially because his statements are so dishonest and so against what he considers truth, because there's tons of available facts and evidence, like I mentioned, for example, a gazelle and the lion, that prove that morality is subjective, and that prove that his opinion on it is completely off base. Was he willing to change his opinion? No, because he feels like he's appealing to other people to accept the idea of, well, we think morality should be a certain way. Or Christians say, well, you have no morality. So he goes, well, I have to pretend I do, or I definitely do. You know, he gets in this weird ideology that he needs to prove something that is absolutely false to appeal to and accept. So he gets confirmation, he gets acceptance from the theist community. That's unfortunately a huge problem with him. He's too busy looking for acceptance rather than caring about what is actually true and what is not true. It is certainly objective that morality is subjective. No one can actually argue that rationally, as I've mentioned before. And it's clear indication of your honesty and your understanding of a certain situation when you do try to argue that. It's clear that you're not being rational, because by definition that is not rational. You can pretend it is, but it is not. By definition, if you can show me a coherent fact that is observable and repeatable that shows that there is such thing between good and bad, I will agree with you. Why? Because that's what matters. My opinion itself is derived from evidence and circumstantial situations. I can't guarantee that I won't disagree with you, but as far as I can tell, and as far as anybody can ever demonstrate to me to this point, morality is only subjective. There's no such thing as objective morality. You can say that, is it good for the continuity of the species? That's a hugely subjective concept, especially as someone who realizes the damage human species does to every other living species. The fact that humans try to pretend they're not just like every other species. The fact that humans try to compete and be a separate part of the biological community of life. The fact that humans try to pretend that we have a sustainable system that we maintain ourselves rather than maintaining off the biological community of life shows that humans are actually in conflict with that situation. The conflict with that is absolutely it's shown in the way that humans are actually reduced in their chance at survival, their chance at continuing their species, because we rely 100% on other living species to survive. And our disregard for their continuance is a disregard for our continuance. But whether we should continue or not, of course, it's always objective. Whether we should live or not are always subjective. Whether we should continue life, subjective. Whether we should, hurt each other because we don't like getting hurt ourselves, still subjective. Pretending it's not does not create some absolute morality that everybody needs to follow. It just shows your dishonesty. Sure, it's preferable if people follow your morality, but that does not make it true, and it certainly never will make it true. It's important to realize that with the destruction that humans give to the rest of the community. I may think something is good, but that's my own opinion based on my own circumstances. That brings me to the concept even further of, is rape good or is rape bad? Let me just say, it's not objective. It's not objective in any way. Someone will have a different opinion based on what's going on. So I really don't care about your concept. Is rape good? Is rape bad? Should rape happen? I would say absolutely. Rape should definitely happen. Without rape, there would not be species of any kind on this planet that I'm aware of. Almost every species that lives and moves that I'm aware of rapes another. Every plant that I'm aware of that has any way of impregnating or sending their pollen to impregnate another plant does not say, do you mind if I send my pollen your way? Yes, you're okay with it? Okay, good. Sending my pollen. I'm not aware of any fucking deer out there that goes, yo, doe, you mind if I stick my dick in you? Yes, please, go ahead. Okay. It's an attempt at intercourse, which is either fought against or accepted, or fought against to a point where it is accepted. By definition, that's always rape. Naturally, every species rape that I'm aware of. And if you want to call it good or bad, is actually completely irrelevant to the concept if a species that rape is natural or not, or if rape is natural. Rape, by definition, is natural regardless of whether you think it is right or wrong. And I'm not even going to get into the concept of right or wrong because my subjective opinion on it does not fucking matter at all. But the fact that you are willing to violate people's rights based on the most fundamental aspect of reproduction, which is rape, shows that you have a disagreement of rights. You hate people for having different opinions. You want to violate them for having different opinions. You want to hurt them for having different opinions. It's pretty fucking sad. by definition, rape is natural, and your belief of good and wrong is subjective. So why should you imply force on people based on your subjective understanding? Is it okay if I apply force on you based on my objective standing? So let's say I say it's great to just fucking choke out people. Does that mean I should just apply chokeouts to everybody I know because I think it's great? Of course. That's the ideology of the state. If you think it's good, do it to others because you think it's good. That's the way it is. Whatever I think is good is the right way and what I should implement on other people. That is statism. Statism in general is the belief that I need to control you, I want to control you, I want to hurt you, let me hurt you. Anybody who thinks the state is necessary supports the Nazis and supports all that. That's an absolute undeniable fact. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. If you support the state, you support the state. You can't pretend you don't I only support the state when it's in my favor. Okay, if that's the case, and you subjectively support the state based on arbitrary ideologies of you're basically saying, if I support the state at this specific instance and this specific ideology, I will violate your life and your rights to implement my belief on you. That's fine. If that's what you believe, but then you cannot say that is objective. You cannot say that is right or wrong, objectively. But I can definitely say, according to my opinion, you are violating my rights. You're violating my person. You're hurting other people. Period. In order for something to rape another thing, it requires basically, if you think about what is rape, rape is the unwanted action of sex, in a sense. Anytime I try to slip my dick or any other living thing slips its thing into an orifice, is considered rape. Okay, rape is absolutely necessary for all procreation of every natural species I'm aware of, including humans. And another example, for example, when I try my best to have intercourse with a female or with another person, though it's a female. In my case, what I do is I don't sit there. I don't say, you okay with me having sex with you? You don't mind if I stick my dick in you right now? That's okay. Are you sure it's okay if I stick my dick in you? I don't confirm any kind of concept like that. In most cases, there's never even talking. There's some kind of emotional connection. You feel each other. You end up rubbing each other. Whatever the fuck goes on, you end up sliding it in there. A lot of feminists will say that rape is, a complete violation of rights. It's a hurt to people. And in some ways, I see their point because rape can be used to hurt people. Rape can be used, unfortunately, to try to actually make people feel like shit as best as possible. It's important to point out that some people want to hurt somebody through the act of sexually assaulting them, or what we consider sexual assault. I'm not going to get into the ideology of what is right and wrong because that is completely subjective. Whether you think it's right or wrong, that's your opinion. And I'm not going to tell you you're wrong in your opinion because your opinion is your opinion. Personally, I think that there could be many other ways to deal with that. But the most important thing to point out is that ideology is created by statism. The fact that you make rape itself illegal means that more people who rape are going to result in killing the person they rape to avoid prosecution. They're going to result in hurting the person they rape to avoid that person talking about it and creating prosecution. The fact that you make rape illegal guarantees and forces more problems within rape. There would be almost zero, if not a tiny percent of actual people being hurt or murdered during rape. The fact that you want it illegal, the fact that you advocate for it being illegal, and the fact that it is illegal creates way more problems, creates violence within rape that would not naturally be there in any sense, creates aggression and regret and wanting to eliminate someone so they can even speak about it. That would not exist without that. The fact that you make rape illegal means that you actually cause a lot more violently and physically hurt people than there would be naturally. So you being against rape is advocating violence in a lot of ways. You being against rape and making it illegal advocates the murder of rape victims. If you don't see that, delusion is all I can say. But that just takes a basic understanding of fucking basic knowledge. This is the way that it is. If you can show me how many other species kill their rape victims, since almost everything they fuck is a rape victim. Show me how them just kill. How many they kill? How many do they kill? How many are you gonna show me? None? I didn't fucking think so. What you're telling me simply is that you're willing to look at the actual observable and repeatable, therefore accepted as truth situations, which we call facts, and you're more willing to say that something is caused by the action itself, such as rape automatically causes hurting to the victim. That's not true in any way. Rape actually, in a lot of cases, is not going to be hurting. There's a reason why the vagina itself is stimulated by nerves that feel good. So the male can actually stick his penis inside the vagina and not hurt the other one. So they both feel some kind of pleasure, and so the act of actually coming inside it happens. If it was painful, how many natural things would finally give in to it? Not many. I mean, naturally, of course, the reaction is, whoa, what's going on? What's going on? Once it slips in, a lot of times there's not fighting anymore. I mean, but the fact is, the whole point of talking about this is explaining that your subjective opinion does not and will not rule other people. If you wanted to rule over other people through your statist mentality, you hate freedom, you hate rights, you hate other people, and you absolutely hate being able to do what is available to you to do at the time. In general, you hate yourself, you hate people, you hate fucking life. I mean, that's just a general understanding of what someone who hates freedom and wants to control other people is. Anyone who is a statist hates freedom and wants to control other people. They enjoy watching people get hurt because they perpetuate people getting hurt through their laws and through their violations of rights. I've never met a statist who does not want to see people hurt. Matt Dillahunty, it's clear when everything he says, basically, he encourages and he wants to see people get hurt, basically just for disagreeing with his ideology of what is right. Him and Tracy, for example, had a comment where they were talking about statism and how statism is a requirement through a social contract while not understanding any concepts of what a contract is. For example, if someone says, hey, Justin, you signed my contract, and I say, no, I didn't, show me the contract I signed. If you can't reproduce the contract, I'm under no legal obligation in this fucking in this society, in this government, to do anything with them. Under what everybody's understanding of a contract is, it requires me to sign or agree with something. Guess what? I never signed or agreed to be a citizen under your nation that is required to follow your rules. Fucking other Native Americans who were here before your white fucking American fucking English ass, who genocided millions of people. If you're gonna tell me I have to leave, or I have to fucking conform to your society, or I have to sign a social contract, you can suck a fucking big cock there, buddy. It's just disgusting that you fucking could possibly think like that. You're way worse or just as bad as any Christian supporting murder of gays or supporting anything like that. You're way worse. Actually, you are worse. You are the most disgusting fucking people there are. Statists are by far the worst people out there because they want to control your life, they want to hurt you and destroy you based on their subjective and usually misinformed opinion, such as Matt Dillahunty's, one of the most misinformed people I've ever seen or heard from in my entire life. It is extremely sad and unfortunate. And the fact that he thinks he's some form of superhero for atheists makes me laugh because he's nothing but a statist. He's nothing but... I have to question whether he is really an atheist anyways. A lot of his beliefs show that he does believe in a supernatural beings. The fact that you can say that, for example, I can't violate rights by hurting people, but we can give that right to somebody else to violate other people, shows he believes in supernatural powers, at the very least. He believes in magical, weird human abilities that other things don't have and that he doesn't have himself. You'd have to question the logical ability of someone like that to actually make any coherent arguments against basic theism of the supernatural ideology, when he supports supernatural beliefs themselves by saying that humans can't live on their own. Humans never lived on their own, apparently, and it requires some kind of society or citizenship and social contract to live together. He believes that humans are inherently bad and they're just going to hurt each other without that, So in this quick video, even though it's a little longer than I expected, I kind of went on a little tangent. Rape is absolutely natural. Whether you think it's right or wrong is irrelevant to the fact that it is natural. If you're considering this a naturalistic fallacy, it is flawed, because I'm not concluding in any way that something is right or wrong because it's natural. Right or wrong does not actually exist. It is nothing but subjective opinion based on your current situations. Anybody who believes that right or wrong actually exists objectively is lying to themselves and lying to other people, because I don't believe anybody actually believes that. The facts are so clear and coherent The simple fact that people disagree shows that no one does believe that. When you say something and someone disagrees, proves that there is no objective truth, right, wrong, or anything like that. And if you try to perpetuate that, you were just wanting to violate people's rights. You want to hurt other people, is what this shows me. So the truth of the matter is, you can say a lot of things about rape. You can say how you think it's wrong, how you think it's bad. But the truth is, rape is absolutely natural and almost required in almost every circumstance I'm aware of in the fucking biological community of life. If rape did not happen in the biological community of life, humans would not exist. Many other species would not exist. Life on this planet would not exist in any way as we know it. So if you want to call me a rape apologist or blame the victim, do whatever you want to do. But I'd like you, if you can prove me wrong, that would be great. I'd like to see it. But the truth of the matter is, every species I personally am aware of rapes, and it is important to the continuance of their species. How adequate that is to human rape, like I mentioned, the bad things with human rape come from making it illegal. The fact that people are hurt, abused, killed come from the fact that it is made illegal. If it was not made illegal, there's absolutely no reason any of those things would happen. So the fact that you made it legal inherently causes those problems. If you want to actually prove that wrong, I give you the fucking challenge to do so.